Hello and welcome to Magic Rabbits,
a podcast exploring the outermost edges of the music business that never was.
Celebrating the masses who never quite made Glastonbury but had the best of times on the journey.
Here's to every one of us. Hello and welcome to another episode of Magic Rabbits, the podcast with me, Damian Scott, and me mate, Tim Riley.
Hello there.
So this week, Tim, you've got me back.
I got you back because on the last episode we did a song and featured a song called Things We Said in Bed, which I wasn't happy about. I didn't mind doing it, but I wasn't happy with the song, and I never was. I never liked the song.
And that was your song?
That was my song, yeah. And I was never a massive fan of it.
Where I was.
For loads of reasons, yeah. So this week, we're doing your song, Watercolours.
Which I don't like.
Which you don't like.
And you played your trump card, because I messaged you saying, I don't want to do it. And you went, tough.
Yeah,
we did my song last week, so we're doing your bad song this week.
Yeah.
So yeah, I really didn't want to do this one. It's an old Templemen song. So Templemen was the band we were in before Boat Thief. And all we had of this was a really awful, scratchy old tape recording of a rehearsal we did in a cricket club. And so we had to listen back to it to work out how does it go? What are the lyrics? How does it work? What are the chords? And I never particularly liked it. For me, this song felt like one of those songs, those naive songs you wrote as a youngster. I felt like I was trying to cram too much in. So for me, this felt like four songs. There are four very specific sections to this song: the verse, the pre-chorus, the chorus, and then a coda, the end part, which tends to be what codas are. And it just felt like four very disparate things that I'd crammed together, like just put together to sound clever. Like we could go all over the place and change these chords and be really erratic and it would sound good. And I don't think it ever did. But what we've done, and we've re-recorded it, and what I think you've done in terms of the arrangement and the production of this last week we recorded this, is make it sound coherent. We've glued it together, or you've managed to glue it together. Good. You've made it good. You've taken a sad song and made it better, Tim. Not that it's a sad song.
Let me just write that down.
Yeah, we should use that. That's the starter for the next one. So, really happy with the way it's turned out. Really happy. So I actually listened to this. You sent me the final produced version. I'm going, I like it. It sounds good. So you can hear that at the end of it. So you've got to listen to the 40-odd minutes of inane chat unless you just fast forward it, of course. There's always that. And listen to the last 3.5 minutes.
It's funny what you were saying there about trying to cram too much in. You tend to do that when you're a young songwriter. You tend to do that, I think. You've got all these influences coming at you, all these different inspirations, and you just want to cram it all in, thinking it's going to be your last ever song or something, and you try and get it all in there, and then it's not till sometimes years later that you look at it and think, hang on, that's just too much, like you're discussing it now, We would never have said that back then. We would never have said, there's just too much in this, we can't do it, it's ridiculous, it's too full of stuff.
And it's that youthful notion of trying to impress people and be clever. Yeah. When the older you get, the more mature you get, the less insecure you get. And I'm just going to write a sweet little song, and you don't care. But then you're like, oh no, it's got to be really clever and really interesting and really,
So what's the song about then?
So the song Watercolours is one great big extended metaphor, really. And again, when you're young, you're trying to use all these literary kind of techniques, and so it's one continuous metaphor to talk about womanhood, really, femininity. It's not about a person. I mean, it's a love song to all intents and purposes, but it's not a love song to a particular person in this case. It's just about the complexity and the broadness.
It's a love song to womankind.
It is a love song to womankind.
You were way ahead of your time.
I think so. I was a pioneer of pap.
That's P.O.P.
Yeah,
pop.
Yeah,
pioneer of pop and pap.
Yeah, it's a song just talking about the complexity of what femininity and womanhood is to a man. So it's brilliant. It's all these. It's a spectrum. And I started with that idea of a spectrum, then thought about, it's a palette, like a painter's palette, and imagining a kind of a woman or womanhood as this complex painting and all the shades in watercolours that you can have. So it's the idea of looking at a painting of the idea of womanhood. And even now I'm talking to myself and I'm boring myself. It just sounds like one of those sounds like a science experiment rather than an actual song. It was just very like, I'm going to explore metaphor. I'm going to explore tension and resolution in the chords.
In the fact that you're not just boring yourself.
Yeah, now boring hundreds of listeners. Yeah. Thank you for that. Anyway, that's what it's roughly about, and we'll hear it at the end. But I think the lyrics are the thing that I want to talk about, because it was quite a complex lyric and this extended metaphor, and you're sat there going, how do I keep extending this ridiculous metaphor about watercolours and a painting and everything? And so it becomes what I think I've heard described as like sixth form poetry. I think it was Roddy Frame from As the Camera who talked about this idea of sometimes when you're young, you're desperately trying to impress, like your English teacher has said, can you write a poem on womanhood? You go like, I'm going to write a really clever poem on womanhood and I'm going to call it Watercolours, and it's going to be this extended metaphor and it's going to go on for hours and hours, and people are just going to be sat there going, shut up. So it's a song very much based on its lyrics, which you do get from time to time. Some songs you don't care about the lyrics, you just go, I'm just going to write some tripe and it's a great tune and the lyrics will hold because it's a great tune and it sounds great and it's got its own momentum and everything. But some songs are very lyric based, and this is about the way, not just the actual lyrics, but the way the lyrics sound and the way the sounds trigger the melody and work with the melody. And there's a pre-chorus section that says, in the silence and the calm of a gallery, and that was meant to be very musically calm. So it goes from a very jagged verse using these suspended seventh chords that are quite aggressive.
Yeah, I want to talk about the music actually more in a second.
All right, okay. So then it goes, so on purpose, I think, well, how can I, when I'm saying silence and calm, how do the chords and how does the melody suddenly become silent and calm? And so it was one of those where the lyrics and music were meant to be working really, really together in harmony, rather than just, I've got a great tune, I'll just dash off some lyrics, which I do. I'm sure you do as well. You just
take more care.
Yeah, you probably take much more care. But yeah, very often you just go, well, that's a good enough lyric. It's fine. I'm just going to sing some, jaunty stuff and make some stuff up that's kind of a bit meaningless. But this wasn't that.
Just to have a little bit of a focus on the music just for a second. We'll go back to the lyrics afterwards, but because this episode is going to be more about lyrics, I guess, than music because of the way this song turned out. But typical of us, whatever project we've been involved in, I get the feeling that the music that we've created isn't of its time. In other words, you can't say, oh, that was written then or that was written then by just listening to it, because this was in the 80s when everybody was packing a synth, and we were writing things that were just not of their time. And that's probably, if we're looking, at this in a broader sense, that may be why we weren't picked up, why we weren't sort of seen at any point in any of our career.
We were just too good.
No, we were just too out of time, just out of place, because we were writing what seemed okay for us, what came naturally to us, but we weren't writing things that were necessarily of their time, that reflected what was going on. And once again, this one is a typical example of that, as is, things we said in bed. They're just not typical of what was going on in the 80s at all. So I don't know what... I think the point I'm trying to make is we were never bending towards what we thought we needed to do musically or lyrically. We always just did what we wanted.
Yeah.
And so often when people make it, they're doing the opposite of that. They're thinking, what do people want? And they're moving towards that.
Yeah, you're right. Sometimes it's about just doing what you want to do, and you kind of have this almost out of body experience with the music industry and what you like stylistically, and you think, I'm going to try and do this. I want to do this today, and for this song, I very much sat down. I remember sitting down and going, and it was like an experiment, this song, which is probably why I don't like it as much, because it's not a natural song. It felt like something I really worked at, like it was a science experiment, like I think I just said before. And I sat down with the intention of writing something about the whole notion of tension and release, which I think it's something I love in any art. Tension and release are very important in art. You create, as artists, you create a sense of tension and then you give it some resolution. It can happen in a painting where you get a beautiful flower in the middle of a jagged forest, and you look and the whole painting gives you a sense of tension when you look at it, but then you find the point of peace in it. In fact, music theory is like that. If you're playing in a key, you're playing in the key of G, music theory tells you that you should resolve back to that G if you want it to be sweet, if you want a sense of resolution, if you want people to feel like they've come home. You don't finish on the chord of C if you're in the key of G. But you can, but it will have a tension to it. And I think lots of bands work with this. Bands like that I've mentioned before, my favourite band XTC, people like Frank Zappa, Captain Beefheart, millions and millions of bands do it where they create very jagged music, but then suddenly bring you into a place of peace. And that piece is really satisfying. I remember getting on a plane once to Dublin and from Manchester, and it's a very short flight, as you know, it's like a sort of 40-minute flight. And it was the worst turbulence we've ever experienced.
It's supposed to be really
one of the worst places.
Yeah.
But this was 30 minutes of the most terrifying turbulence I've ever experienced on an aircraft. People were everyone, man, woman, child, screaming and just holding on to everything for dear life and just praying that the plane would land. And when it landed, fine, everyone just cheered and hugged and cried, wept and got up and... Instead of just filing off the plane, like not looking at each other, getting no eye contact, just rolling your little bag down the aisle and shuffling down. Instead of that, we were all just talking and laughing. And this idea of that tension that was caused, that incredible tension, when you release it, it's sweeter than...
So that's exactly the same as coming back to a G then?
That's exactly the same as coming back to a G.
Okay.
I just created a metaphor for you.
That's lovely. I'm just writing.
But that's what music is. And sometimes you create... So intentionally, the verses in Watercolours, in this song we're talking about, were these very jagged, suspended seventh chords. The Police, Andy Summers uses suspended chords a lot in verses, and they create a sense of... not everyone's aware of them, but there is a sense of like, oh, something not quite right, and then suddenly you'll come in with da sweetness, and it's like it's a rush of happiness and joy because the tension has been released, and so that was the idea of this song. So it was very much an experiment. But let's get back to lyrics, because I think we wanted to talk a little bit about lyrics. Yeah. But when we started chatting about favourite lyrics, and how important they are, I think you wanted to talk about the importance, how important lyrics are in music, because music is music, and is it as much about lyrics?
Well, yeah. If you look at globally, the trends globally over in our generation for what the most popular bands, most popular songs are. It's not always about lyrics. It really isn't. It's more about the music and the way that the whole piece of music for 3 minutes or whatever it is moves you and puts you. And, obviously, at what point in your life these songs reach you, that can be a very good milestone in your life, can't it? But quite often, I think it's the music and it's the mood that the music puts across. And sometimes I do believe that you could interchange lyrics and it wouldn't really matter because you've got people with that music. I have to say that it's the music quite often for me that moves me, because obviously if you're listening to words that are in the language that you understand, so we're English and we get English words coming towards you, you can't help but hear them and comprehend them and process them as they hit your ears. You can't help it. It just happens. However, music does something else. It's almost like it appeals to not just your senses, but something else. I can't explain it. However, when I listen to, for example, a band like Prefab Sprout, and I know this is going to sound so trivial because so many people will just know them from a couple of singles that they had. They were very much nearly men like us, really. They had a couple of singles like The King of Rock and Roll and a couple of other things that did sort of okay. However, you and I have been massive fans of theirs from the beginning. Going back to 1984 or something, 85.
Swoon,
yeah.
Steve McQueen albums.
But when you listen to their early singles or their early tracks from their albums, those albums you just mentioned, the words coupled with the very naive, stumbling music is something that I can't quite ironically put into words. But it does something to me. I mean, first of all, I'm a musician. So as you were saying before, the way things resolve and the way things move throughout a song is important to me. However, when I listen to a band like Prefab Sprout, and there are many others that don't seem to do that go in their own way. And you almost think, lads, come on, did you not see what was going on? How come you didn't go to the C major then? How come you didn't resolve that? But they didn't. And I do believe that they were naive enough not to know. These are just a couple of brothers from a little village in County Durham, you know, whose dad's got a petrol station, and they just sit behind the counter serving people, writing songs in between customers. And they by their own admission, they were not great musicians, of course. And so they're coming up with this naive stuff, but with wonderfully pastoral and descriptive lyrics that just cannot help but fall out of them. And they're brilliant as a result. And somebody saw that, you know, a division of CBS, which is Kitchenware Records in Newcastle, saw them and just thought, hang on a minute, you don't realise this, lads, but you're global stars in the making, you know. There's another band, once again, ironically, from the Northeast, more modern day, called Field Music. They're just two brothers, the Brewis brothers. And they are outstanding lyricists and outstanding musicians. But once again, it's fairly basic stuff, very, very basic stuff. The arrangements are a bit weird, but I don't think they're weird in a sort of, let's be weird. Come on, let's be weird. They're just weird because they happen to be that way. And it was the same with Paddy McAloon and you know and his band Prefab Sprout. Exactly that. There's something accidentally brilliant about them. And I have to say that anything that's accidentally brilliant, it's 10 out of 10 for me.
So when you're writing a song, Tim,
talking of accidentally brilliant,
when you're writing a song,
anyway.
How much consideration do you give to the lyric? Or are you writing a tune first and then just go, I'll now try and cram some lyrics in?
It's generally tune for me. So I'm walking the dog or something and I'm just making gibberish notes into my phone.
Yeah.
And I will have the drum beat, I'll have a bass line, I'll have orchestral arrangements, all this stuff in my head before I get to the lyrics. And it's sometimes only when I'm starting to record the music that it will inform it will bring things out of me on a lyrical level. So
a lyric will kind of tumble out at some point.
At some point, yeah.
And that's your start. Because if you're like me, I don't know where you do this. You'll just a phrase will come for no reason. You just go, I've just been given that. It's just arrived. And you can't ever unthink that. That is now almost locked in stone.
Definitely.
You have to use that.
Yeah.
If you try to replace it with something else, you think, well, that's just a placeholder for now. But it never ends up being it. It's somehow, and so that's the seed from. It's almost like the lyric has to grow out from that one thought, and so it sort of has started itself. On its own, and you've got to go from there if you're like me. So you get this phrase, and that's the bit you go from. So
there's just recently, in fact, last year, I went through the tortuous process of selling my house and trying to move house. And we were so desperate for this to happen. Like many people do, when you move in house, all the legal process gets... And these days, it gets just even worse. You know, it seems to get longer and longer and more tortuous as the years go by. And for me, it felt like we were in the middle of a bank job or something, and you get all the money in the big bag and you stuff it in, you zip it up, and all the staff are sitting there on the floor, you know, and you've got them all, you know, cowering in the corners. And then you get outside and you jump into the getaway car and you can't start the getaway car. And I wrote this song. I started to write the music, and then this feeling that I had that had been building up, boiling up inside of me for all this time, started to come out, and it just rolled out very easily. So I do. So, and anyway, so that song ended up being called The Getaway Car, and it's something perhaps, you know, that we'll put on this podcast in subsequent weeks. But it's just sometimes I think that when you've got something going on in your life, it can't. Sometimes as a songwriter, it cannot fail to come out in some way. So it may not inform the music, but it might very well, obviously, inform the lyrics. So rather than you thinking, right, I'm now going to sit down and write a song about something, you'll start to, you know, boil up some music and like in a big cauldron, and then it starts to bubble up with the ideas that you've already got inherent, you know, in there within you, latent in the back of your mind.
Can we just check that the bank job thing was a metaphor, and we're not expecting a knock on the door?
I can't talk about that.
Okay.
I can't talk about that. It's the whole thing.
I think lyrically, though, it's always the hard bit for me, and I'm, you know, for a job, you know, I'm a copywriter, I'm a wordsmith, I guess you'd say, but writing lyrics is the most painful part of it, because you've got this, the tune kind of flows normally. You've got, oh, I love that tune, it's great. And then you can quite easily ruin it by just writing something awful and naive and silly and getting that balance right. There's a song I want to do at some point called The Best Song I Never Wrote, which is the idea of not being able to write a love song. As a musician, writing a love song is the hardest thing in the world, because you either write some trite, sloppy nonsense, or you write something overly complex and stops being a love song, stops being affectionate. And you can never get that line right. Lyrically, you can get the tune, not a problem. But lyrically, you either just go off into some dreadful metaphor, or you stay in some sloppy I love you kind of place, and you just can never get it right. And you overthink it, right? You're overthinking it. Most people are going, that's great, I love it, that's brilliant. You know, the person, the object of your affections is going, yeah, that's great, write that. You know, but you're going, no, it doesn't sound, it's not expressing my inner, you know, self enough. And it's so hard, it's so painful getting that lyric right and matching it to this lovely melody that you think you've got. And you can so easily tip it over the edge one way or another. And it's the hardest part. And when it happens and you go, I'm really happy, that's great. And then when you're not happy with it, and I think that's partly why Watercolours, to me, I'm listening to it and go, oh, it's trying so hard. But I think what's happened and what you've done, how you produced it, smooths it all together. And I'm really happy with it. So lyrically, let me ask you, you're probably going to mention Prefab Sprout now, because you talked about them already. Favourite lyric by another band?
Yeah, it's I Couldn't Bear to Be Special. Paddy McAloon's masterpiece with Prefab Sprout, you know. I mean, once again, I'm you know, at risk here of alienating lots of people who just thought Prefab Sprout were a here today, gone tomorrow kind of thing, which of course they kind of were on a global scale. However, his writing continued to be outstanding. And I can't remember which album this was on. Might have been on Steve McQueen or Swoon. But I Couldn't Bear to Be Special. He's basically saying, I mean, he says things like, so don't think so much of me. I'm just an also-ran. There's a mile between the way you see me and the way I am. I mean, just little things like that. Just fantastic. There's also a song which I think is on From Langley Park to Memphis, which is one of their later albums, called Nightingales. Once again, it's kind of meandering a little bit. It doesn't really go anywhere lyrically, but the way that the lyrics fit with the music is, once again, outstanding. It's wonderful. It's really magical. And it's another one of these examples of when you hear it, it just gets into you. You don't just hear it. You feel everything that he meant it to say, musically and lyrically, all at the same time, and it's not just through your ears. And that, once again, that sounds ridiculous, just saying those words, you know, because of course it's just how you hear it. And I do think, this is going back to a point that we've made before. There are two general types of people. Some people who just love music because they love it and it's great. Turn it up, come on, let's have a dance or whatever. Great, and it does a job. And then there's other people who it's just everything. And I'm afraid I know I am, and I think you are as well. It's just we're just two of those kind of people for whom it just means everything. And we're not just hearing it with our ears. It's something else. And once again, going back to the teaching thing, I tried to say that to my students, you know, are we the kind of being that just hears music? Or is there something else? Once it gets in there, does it do something else to you? Like rearranging your molecules? Yeah. You know, and we used to talk about that all the time. You know, you can imagine I bored them stupid. You know? they were looking at the clock.
I'm in the wrong class. I'm in biology.
I thought they were just staring into space, you know, taking it all in, but they were just looking at the clock, really, thinking it's nearly sausage pasta time.
Greg's.
Yeah.
There's a line from Nightingales that always got me. It's not a line, it's like two words that just fascinated me and always leapt out at me and made me want to like go into the song more and go into what Paddy McAloon means and draws you into a story. And I love lyrics that make you go, what's this story? I want to step into the story. And at one point he just goes, we're just cartoon cats. And I just, every time I hear that, I go, why do I love that? If someone just walked up to me in the street and looked at me in the face and went, we're just cartoon cats. I'd go.
You'd call an ambulance.
Yeah, I'd call an ambulance. No, I'd go. Why? Tell me more about that. That's just what a great thing to say. You know, if someone was at a dinner party and said that, you'd go, "That's you've let me into your story now. You've brought me in."
Cats.
And I kind of do know what he means. It's great. You know, it's like with this fun pretense thing that we do. But I love that Nightingale as well. You sent me a really lovely jazz version of that, some German, Dutch jazz club version of that song. Some little, underground band that were doing this in a cellar somewhere in I don't know where it was, Amsterdam or something.
I was in tears when I saw it. Absolutely loved that song. Any version of it.
Yeah, it's a lovely song.
It's worth talking about.
You don't do my favourite lyrics. So let's talk about my favourite lyrics.
Yeah, what are your favourite?
What am I here for? Welcome to the Tim Riley Show.
I'm so sorry. Please, this is just ridiculous. Go on.
There's some problem with these conversations is they go off on tangents.
They do,
We might even... we tend to not really...
Please, what are your favourite lyrics?
Oh, it's funny you should ask me that, Tim. But I do have some prepared right here.
Oh, right.
My favourite lyric, I thought about this the other day. Well, in fact, I didn't have to think about it. It's always been, since I first heard it. It's going back to the idea of story, I just mentioned before. Suddenly, if a line makes you feel like you're in a story... And the greatest writers do this. The greatest writers can use economy with the way that they don't have to use a lot of words to describe something. They just give an essence of something and you fill in the blanks. You build a story around it. Ernest Hemingway is probably the greatest example of this.
That's like a compliment to your listener, isn't it? You're complimenting the listener.
Yeah, exactly.
You're saying, here's the bit, but you know what else is coming in there.
Exactly. And I think and people underestimate that. I think a lot of writers or artists, whatever, underestimate that the greatest joy in art is filling in the blanks because that brings us into the narrative rather than standing outside of it. Yeah. And we suddenly feel rewarded for being thought of as intelligent. If you're reading a book and someone doesn't have to describe what happens next, but you get it. You get what the person's thinking because you've just hinted at it by the way they've behaved, and you go, and it's a sense of reward. This, the sort of the whatever brain chemical is released when you're rewarded. It's great. So there's a line in a Paul Simon song. Well, it's a Simon and Garfunkel song, "Only Living Boy in New York," and he just says one line, and he just says, "I get all the news I need on the weather report," and that just makes me so excited when I hear that. I just think I understand this person. I understand this person getting up going, I don't care, I just want to know what the weather is. Nothing else interests me. And I get all the news I need on the weather report. It's just a beautiful bit of storytelling. And it's a story, apparently he wrote this, Paul Simon wrote this when Art Garfunkel left for a while to go and film Catch-22. He had a part in Catch-22 and he went off to Mexico. And so Paul Simon was left alone without his writing partner, without his musical partner in New York. And he kind of didn't know what to do. And he just wrote this song, "Only Living Boy in New York." And he wrote it about Art Garfunkel kind of leaving him as if he'd left him forever. And he just, you had this sense of, I just get up and don't know what to do. The only thing I need is just what's the weather like today, and it just draws me into that story, and it works so beautifully with a melody as well. He's definitely a songwriter that crafts his words to his melody and to the song, rather than just I've got a nice I'll just write some lyrics that work, that are in time, that are in the right meter, that are in the right kind of rhythmically work. They're kind of symbiotically kind of just connected, that you couldn't have one without the other, and yeah.
The funny thing is with Paul Simon, on Simon and Garfunkel, musically, it's very economical. It's just a guitar, The pair of them can just sit there, a couple of microphones and a guitar, and they can make wonderful, wonderful music. So it's not always about the music, of course. And then, it's about the lyrics. But then later on in his career, when he went to Africa, I think, and did lots of...
Yeah,
I mean...
The Graceland stuff.
Graceland, all that. Very wordy and very musical.
Yeah.
So it's almost like he wanted, okay, we've done that, now let's do this. Let's make it more of a thing, more of a big production, big songs and big musical input. I've always found him over wordy.
Yeah.
over wordy.
It can be, especially the Graceland stuff is very wordy and very kind of rhythmically wordy, like just streams of consciousness wordiness. But for me, that one was just very beautiful. Just simple. That's very. I get all the news I need on the weather report. Isn't wordy and complicated. It's just a very simple. It's almost like conversational. It's just like, you could almost be saying that to someone. We're just hearing the pause of Frank, your dog, on the floor there as he exits the recording studio. I don't know whether you can hear that in the background. But anyway, I had to mention Art Garfunkel because you're your mate. You went for a walk together. We mentioned that in the previous one. So I thought, just bring this.
Cards these days.
We can't escape. Our careers are entwined with Simon and Garfunkel. The other one I want to mention very quickly is, I can't.
You just go on and it's all about you.
It's all about me. Welcome to the Damian Scott Show. XDC, who, literally my all-time. They are very lyrical. Andy Partridge, who's the predominant songwriter at XDC, incredibly wordy and sometimes overly wordy, and someone who I probably learned a lot from. You can tell he just has a whole bag full of techniques that he pulls out. I'm going to use alliteration and metaphor and simile and onomatopoeia and all this kind of stuff, and he'll do that like it is an English tutorial, but occasionally he just writes something sublime. And my favourite lyric of his is a song called "The Man Who Sailed Around His Soul," which is kind of a jazz-tinged song. And I'd always loved this as my favourite lyric, and I probably learnt a lot from it. And the first verse just goes, "The man who sailed around his soul from east to west, from pole to pole, with ego as his drunken captain, greed the mutineer who locked all reason in the hold." And it sounds incredibly complicated, but it's when you hear it in the sort of lazy jazz.
Like
it sounds what?
Like Milton or something.
Yeah, it does. He does, and that's probably a big inspiration to him. But I looked it up. I thought I'll just check. I looked it up the other day to check the lyrics and just make sure I was remembering them right. And it turns out it's Andy Partridge's all-time favourite lyric. And I felt really good about myself. I thought, that's my favourite Andy Partridge lyric, and it's also his. So that felt quite nice.
You've always liked lyrics. I feel like you've always been influenced by and have held dear bands and artists that are more about their lyrics.
I think I
Elvis
have.
Costello.
Yeah.
There's another one.
And you know what? You know what I think that is? And again, this is not planned. You've just literally triggered a memory there. These are like little therapy sessions, these podcasts for us. But you've made me realise why. Suddenly my mind just went, why is that? And I felt this. I remember growing up, my dad used to read me or recite to me little bits of poems, like some of it nonsense poems, like Lear kind of stuff, and Lewis Carroll and the Jabberwocky and stuff like that. He would know all this stuff off Pat. He would. Pat was our uncle. He told him, and he would just rattle these off. We'd be driving somewhere, and he'd just say something like, "The moan of doves in immemorial elms and the murmurings of innumerable bees." And then he'd just carry on doing something. He'd just quoting, or he'd quote something from Wilfred Owen war poem or something. And I grew up with just this love of these bubbling words.
You've just reminded me of something that.
I wrote a song called Innumerable Bees. I did, yeah. I had to, because that was just deeply embedded in me. And that's I've gone blank on who wrote that poem.
Right.
Doesn't matter. We'll mention it next time. It just shows this isn't rehearsed. So yeah, I grew up with this love of couplets and words that sounded lovely in the mouth. Do you know what I mean? That bubbled up, and sounded just had the sound of the words, not just necessarily the meaning of the words, but to say the moan of doves in immemorial elms and the murmurings of innumerable bees is just glorious. Yeah. And it used to do this other thing as well, where it'd say, how many beans make 5?
Oh, hang on, I know this one.
Do you know it?
Is it a bean? 2 beans, a bean and a half a bean.
2 beans and a bean and a bean. And it's just, and even that, it's a nonsense bit of silliness.
I wonder where that came from.
But it just bubbles, and I love the rhythmic, onomatopoeic, rumble of those words, and it's a sort of it's a little maths problem as well.
I think
Frank's back, clattering down the hallway. So that's probably where it came from. This desire to come up with rhythmic, interesting, bubbling sounds that employ all these kind of techniques. I loved English at school, and I always thought I was going to be something to do with writing, a journalist or a writer or whatever. And it turns out, I became a copywriter. But I bring that, I think, to the song. So yeah.
Can we just broach the subject of songs that are written from a place of despair and grief and heartache, or from joy. I know from my personal standpoint, when I've been in going through a period of, heartache or despair or whatever, I can write tons of stuff very, very easily, because it just seems like that's forcing itself out of me. Whereas happy stuff, I find that I can find that really, really hard. Really hard. I remember when my son was born, and he was born in October, I remember starting to write a song called Autumn Boy. Never finished it because I couldn't get past the first few lines. I just couldn't do it. It's almost like nothing I could write could be as important and and moving as the actual feeling. Whereas if it's about despair, you can just spit it all out.
Yeah,
and it all comes out very easily.
I think that's absolutely right. I mentioned this before about trying to write the best song I never wrote. Well, I wrote a song called The Best Song I Never Wrote, which was like saying the best song I never wrote is a really great love song, but I haven't written it yet. Because I just, that joyfulness, it's hard to articulate it without it sounding, like you say, you can't really sum it up, or it either sounds too trite or it becomes so obscure that it's no longer articulating joy. It just becomes this rather clever thing and doesn't express your heart. And expressing your heart can actually just sound really trite and really rubbish sometimes in a song. Or at least we think we are. As artists, you kind of look at it and go, yeah, I'm trying too hard there, or I'm not trying enough. But I think
you're pretty good at writing
joyful stuff.
Yeah,
I was going to say, I think I probably err more towards joyful.
Yeah.
I think I'm rewinding in my head now furiously, trying to think, have I written any kind of angsty songs? I don't think I've written many, probably when I was a bit younger, but I don't think I've written many about tragedy or grief or anything like that. I think I tend to find joy a natural thing to write about. I'm just trying to work on a song at the moment called Every Planet's Moon. And the idea of, when people say I'm over the moon, I was writing a song. I thought, what a great idea to say I'm over every planet's moon. I'm so happy I'm over every single planet's moon. And I quite like the sound of the words I'm over every planet's moon.
What's that planet that's got two moons? What's that one? Is it Venus or something?
Are you trying to get me to say Uranus?
No,
on a podcast.
No, you just said it.
All right.
So you just said Uranus.
So we've talked about other people's lyrics, and what about lyrics we've written, favourite lyrics we've written? And I'm aware that we can't really probably pick our own, because that's like picking your own favourite child or something, which is impossible. Or, it's just a bit, you're never going to like your own lyrics, really, and able to talk about them without sounding a bit vain. So let's turn the tables. Well, I know what my favourite lyric of yours is, and I think that's the thing. We both, when you write with someone, you end up really loving what they do, and that's great, and that's part of the creative process. You give them confidence to go, oh, all right, we'll pursue that. You think of yourself, I think, sometimes as more of the music side than the lyric side, but yet your lyrics, are often astonishing. They would go to places. They would go to places I wouldn't go, and you go, that's fascinating. Why have you gone there? Why have you done that? And it makes me go, right, I could explore that. But I always remember one we used to play live a lot as Boat Thief. It was a song we played, and it's a very, very simple lyric, but it just worked. And I think this is back to the idea of writing a love song that expresses something, and when someone else expresses it, it doesn't sound corny. And that's the point. I want to write a song, and I think it's corny, but if I played it to my wife, she'd probably go, I love that. That's great. That's really expressing something simple and beautiful. I mean, Paul Buchanan from Blue Nile.
Yeah, wow.
He can just simply say, he can just sing, I love you in a song, and you go, that's gorgeous. And he's just saying, I love you, but he does it in a way that just melts your heart.
Yeah, I mean, when people go and see the Blue Nile, they end up in tears.
They all end up in tears. Apparently it's like men across the, it's like 50-year-old men all weeping.
Glaswegian men.
But there's a song we used to do called, and you don't know I'm going to say this, Magnificent.
Oh, right.
And we used to play This Is Boat Thief. We played it live a fair bit. And the lyric is just, I wish I knew what it was.
Did we play it? Sorry, correct.
Yeah, we did. We played it Boat Thief. What, you're going to say, did we play it live?
No, I interrupted you there as you were about to say one of my lyrics then, which is quite lovely. I'm sorry.
No, and we used to sing, or Pete used to sing. Pete sang it. It was your song, but Pete sang it. I wish I knew what it was that made you so magnificent in the morning. I thought, what just a lovely, lovely, like so simple, so expressive. It's not trying to be clever. It worked with the melody beautifully. And I remember every time we sang it, I thought, that's such a lovely sentiment. It's not directly obvious. It's not just going, I love you. It's expressing something a lot more articulate. It's simple but not simplistic, and it's expressive but without being corny. And it ticked all the right boxes for a great love song. And I loved Magnificent. In fact, maybe we could revisit it one of these days. I don't know if we can even remember it, but anyway.
I can remember it, yeah.
So, yeah.
With yours, there are so many.
Thank you very much.
No, it's going to be harder for you to pick one of mine, I think, because I tend to concentrate more on the music, really, than the lyrics. But your lyrics have been brilliant since I first met you, and they continue to be now. I mean, just the other day when we were recording something, we couldn't remember one of the verses for something. I think it might have been Newlyweds, the first episode of our podcast series.
Yeah.
And you just rattled something off within a couple of minutes. But when I read it, I thought, this is just incredible. And I mean, you literally rattled it off in a few seconds just before we recorded it. So the ability for you to do that, it continues. But right back when we were boys, and we were, in these bands in the early days, you would do it then. I mean, if I look at the Boat Thief era, you would write things like The Best of Both Worlds. Now, The Best of Both Worlds is a work of art, lyrically. Absolute work of art.
Would you have to put a little asterisk on this and say that was also written by Pete Kellback?
He wrote the music.
He started writing the words.
Okay.
In fact, I think he wrote Best of Both Worlds, and I wrote a couple of verses.
Yeah.
So there's some of the verses that's not my not lyrically not my song. It's some of it is my song, and I can't even remember.
This is why we should have rehearsed this.
Yes, why we should rehearse. So pick another one of my great songs then.
The one where you go, "Hey Jude, don't make it bad."
Yeah.
Take a sad song, make it better.
Well, I mentioned it earlier, yeah. I've just been finishing that off.
Okay, well, so many others. Shine, which is off the first album. Shine, that is absolutely incredible.
That's one of mine, yeah.
And,
I am happy with that lyric, actually. That was one of those... Yeah. And that was going back to joy again, like the idea of expressing a joyful day. It was a joy in the Lake District. It was expressing just what it's like to be a young person on a beautiful day in the middle of the Lake District, just kind of growing up and living there. And it's expressing all those elements of just... like life is just shining. It's just glorious.
After you've kissed young Kate, you're breathless by the farm gate. This kind of thing for me was a real... I mean, coming back to live back up here and being in the band and playing those songs and singing those lyrics with you guys was lovely. It was like a pastoral and jumping back into it, It was really great. Loved it. There's This Bus Runs on Sunshine. One of the highlights of that album, and one of the things that people loved when we played it, was This Bus Runs on Sunshine. And it was just something that Pete said one day when we were in his Land Rover. We looked at the fuel gauge, and it was just on vapours down the bottom. And you said, come on, what are we doing? We're going to have to... And he said, don't worry, this bus runs on sunshine.
And I just put that in my pocket instantly when I'm writing a song when I get home called that.
Yeah.
And it was easy to write because you just suddenly got this starting off point. Yeah. You know exactly where that song was going to go. When you've got a title as glorious as This Bus Runs on Sunshine, you just know where it's going to go, and it just writes itself.
The first line of which is, the spirits of this place is filling me. That's a wonderful thing. I could never write something like that. It's just, it sounds like a classic. It sounds like something you read at school or something. No, it does. It's, like
I probably did.
Wordsworth or something, Yeah. I probably did.
It's all stolen. Everything.
Anyway, I think we've jabbered too much now. We've got to get to a point where we're going to go towards Watercolours.
Yeah.
And I'm looking forward to letting people hear this.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this because I started from a position of going, I really don't want to do this. Dragging, you dragged me screaming into the studio to record this one. And then when we finally did it, we were recording, going, there's something here, maybe this can work. And then you sent me the final mix. I'm going, yeah. That works. That's great. Actually sounds like a coherent song finally after all these years, 30 years.
So before we just finish off with that, we just want to say another big thank you to all the people that are listening and are sending us messages, because this is just churning up some old memories from lots of people this particular time. And of course it's chiming with what they're into now, I would think. They're probably thinking, why am I not still writing or still in a band or still playing or something? Anyway, so thank you very much for all those people that have given us messages. You all know who you are.
Can we also thank your daughter Gemma for sending us some lovely Magic Rabbits mugs?
Oh, the Magic Rabbits mugs.
Thanks, Gemma, in Berlin. That was great.
Fantastic, yeah.
And I've got one. I've stolen one. I've got one at home. So, in fact, it's even appeared on some of our publicity material on the gram and on various places. And can you also maybe quickly mention that we now have a glorious YouTube channel with all these podcasts on and other bits and bobs. So, if you're a YouTuber, then, go and waste many, many hours digging into that stuff.
Right. Thanks very much. And I'm going to see you again next time.
Bye-bye.
She's the pastel blue of a tropical ocean, the gold of a hazy dream. Her apparel rises up like sunshine, pink on a field of green. In the silence and the calm of the gallery, my imagination is a friend to me. She's a picture in watercolours. She's a picture in watercolours. She's the sails in the sunset of a summer regatta, glow of an angel in heavenly bliss, the reds and the browns of an autumn forest, icy reflection of a winter's kiss. In the silence and the calm of a gallery, my imagination is a friend to me. She's a picture in watercolours. She's a picture in watercolours. Sometimes the pale of a Scottish morning, later the rouge of a virgin's blush, a cornfield vista with the sky adorning, nighttime neon in a city's hush. In the silence and the calm of a gallery, my imagination is a friend to me. She's a picture in watercolours. She's a picture in watercolours. Watercolor girl, how can you mean everything? Watercolor girl, you're everything that I see. Watercolor girl, how can you mean everything? Watercolor girl, you're everything that I see. Watercolor.
Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. We really appreciate it. And if you could like and subscribe or even leave a review, that would be just brilliant. Anyway, see you again soon. Bye.